If you're building your ABA company and you're tired of guessing, this is for you. We built the eBCBA blueprint to give you real structure, systems, and support without the fluff. Details are in the description.
All right. I've been on this group for a little bit over a year, and our main goal is to help you run your ABA therapy business as efficiently and effectively as possible. And a couple of things that I've seen over the last year are really frustrating because I see people starting their business really wanting to focus on doing it right and building it where it's scalable and manageable. Some of the things that I've seen are frustrating because we've got money and time getting wasted building policies and procedures that don't necessarily apply to what your business actually needs, or building out operational strategy based on no actual structure. Coaching programs out that could be anywhere from $5,000, $10,000, $25,000. Packets where you can buy your policies and procedures or your forms, or these different packets with basically forms and paperwork where you go and you get a template and you edit it and you put it together, and then that's supposed to be good. And in most cases, from what I've seen, most of that stuff is garbage. It's stuff that you could do in Microsoft Word in 10 minutes, or use ChatGPT in Microsoft Word and do it in 5 minutes. One of the things that I've seen missing from every coaching program, every startup, we have our business plan, we have our mission, we have our financial projections, we know who our contracts are going to be with. Where's your org chart? What is our organizational strategy for our business? How do we start? How do we build it where we have a scalable, maintainable, and sustainable system that can run without you being there? Why ABA? I've seen what happens with early intervention ABA therapy, and I've seen what happens when a child doesn't get early intervention. And it's been a night and day difference between the lives of these children that I've been able to watch grow up. And I realize how important it is. And I've seen the effects that it has on a family when they cannot find therapy in a town where dad can't take a job opportunity. So they have to stay right where they are, and they can't move ahead financially as a family because they can't go to this new town where the promotion is because there's a 6-month waiting list. That's why I personally got into ABA, and being in the IT, cybersecurity, and compliance industry, we had several ABA companies that we worked with. And I started noticing, I think I know why it's so difficult to find ABA services, because the businesses that are running them aren't the most efficient. The ones that are efficient are the big boys, the big companies that have private equity behind them, and they don't really tend to give a crap about their clients or their outcomes. So you've got this balance between, when you go to dental school, you basically get an MBA, right? They teach you how to run a business in dental school. When you're a doctor, they don't do that because most doctors work at hospitals, or a lot of them do anyway, but all dentists go into private practice. The medical school doesn't really involve much business, if any at all. But what the doctors have is they have a phone number they can call and get a business loan based on just a business plan and them starting a medical practice. The bank will loan them the money, and they can go get a couple $1,000,000 from the bank, call one of these doctor office in a box companies, and they'll come out and they'll build it. My dentist just did this. He just called the number. They sent him the blueprints for a building, did the layout, did the design, all of his equipment, all the computers, all the forms, everything. He just started it from scratch. He's got this giant, beautiful 8,000 square foot office building, and now he's running this out. The problem is they're not teaching any of this basic business stuff in the BCBA programs, and there's no ABA in a box sort of solutions. So we don't have that. So we're stuck in between here, where if we're going to start an ABA therapy business, or if we have one that's killing us, we need to be able to make this on our own, develop out the organizational strategy, build the systems, put it all together. And that is what the ABC community is all about, the ABA Business Challenges community. So I want you to think about this. Think about your business, your life, the way that you're running your operations right now, or the way that you're going to be. Does your current organizational strategy accurately reflect your professionalism and dedication to your staff and your clients? I know that you guys are dedicated because your lives are committed to this, but is that reflected in the way that your business runs. If you opened up all of your policies and procedures and your organizational strategy and how your business is organized and showed it to someone like a buyer, or a client, would that impress them or repel them? Would it pull them in or scare them away? And then the last one is, how ready are you? Do you feel ready to scale your team to 100 plus people in 30 days? And if you say that's probably not going to happen, it just happened to one of our clients. They had a business. They were both working for a company. Some stuff happened. That company was going under, and they took on all the BCBAs, all the RBTs. They just brought them right over into their business. And day one, they have 106 employees. So those, if they weren't ready, if they weren't organized, if they didn't have their strategy together and they didn't have that planned out, they would be lost. Trust me, it's a husband and wife team. They're both still very stressed out. They've still got a lot of stuff going on. They're a year into this, and they're doing great. They're hanging in there, but they would not have made it through the first round of the fight if they didn't have a really good organizational strategy and a plan for implementation. So how ready would you be in that situation? So what are our problems in ABA? What do we run into that causes us issues in our business? Cash flow with our billing, insurance, denials. You got to call back, deal with that crap, right? That's one of the biggest ones, right? Cash flow. Growth caps. You get to the point where you've got 2 or 3 BCBAs, you've got 5 BTs working under each of them, or RBTs or RBAIs, whatever you call them in your area, but you've got your people and you're capped out because literally all day long as the owner, you're just on the phone, you're answering emails, you're going nonstop, and you've got 15, 20 people working for you. You're capped. You can't grow beyond that because you're just slammed. Anybody feel that way? And then we've got these other issues like compliance struggles, regulatory changes that are constantly happening on the state level, on the national level. Health and Human Services has been saying they're going to update their omnibus rules and their HIPAA high-tech rules since 2023. And they'll tell us, oh, we're going to do it this year. And then it gets pushed the next year. It gets pushed the next year. But when they decide, you have a deadline. And if you don't make that deadline, you're in trouble. They can do it whenever they want to, but you have to comply right away. And then we've got regulatory panic. Some of those decisions are being driven by the fact that our Senate, the most expensive nursing home in the world, we've got a bunch of old people in there that are writing the regulations on stuff that they really don't even know about. And these people are dealing with AI, they're dealing with cybersecurity, they're dealing with Ukraine and Russia and China trying to hack our power grid, all this stuff. So the only thing that they can think to do, and really they're probably right, is to make regulations. It's not the criminals that they can really regulate. They have to regulate us law-abiding citizens and have us protecting the data so that it can't be stolen and used against somebody as identity theft or whatever. So the regulatory panic is, we have this problem, it gets to the Senate or the Congress, and they have to just make a regulation about it, or it gets to the FCC or FTC or SEC, all the different alphabet agencies out there. So this is what we're dealing with. And then one of the biggest challenges is, how many of you guys feel like a prisoner of your business? You can't escape. You can't get away. Are you the owner who's enjoying the rights and the joys of business ownership? Or do you feel like you're just stuck there? Staff recruiting and retention is supposed to be on the same line, but dealing with staff on the recruiting and retention side, bringing people in, getting them onboarded as quickly as possible, them knowing what they need to do on a day-to-day basis, them understanding who it is they report to up the line, who they report to, who their coworkers are, and like how the communication flow works in the business, what their responsibilities are, and how do you judge them on whether or not they're doing a good job? What is it that I'm supposed to do at work today to make sure that my owner looks at me and goes, great job, that's good work, right? What are those things that I'm supposed to do to show my good work? And then, of course, there's burnout. And burnout is its own item because it happens across the board. It happens with BTs, BCBAs, CEOs, owners. It happens with everybody. Where if things are organized in a way where you're just constantly dragged into every situation, you get burnout. It's easy enough for it to happen in any industry, but especially when you're dealing with people that are having to go out and work with the people that we're trying to help. That's a difficult job. So burnout can happen from that anyway. Why would we put them in a situation where we're not organized and streamlined and accentuate that burnout? These are the problems that we're dealing with no matter what. And I know there's a lot more, but those are just the ones that I wanted to point out because this is what we need to focus on overcoming, or at least reducing as much as we can. So what do we do to deal with this? Like I said, we have, these consultants that you can hire, and they charge a bunch of money, and they come in and they tell you how they ran their business for 10 years, which generally doesn't exactly fit with what your business is. Or you'll have a franchise opportunity where one of these franchises will come in and say, you can just buy the franchise and we just provide everything for you. I have spoken with several franchises. There is not a single one that I trust. I don't know how you guys feel about franchises, but I haven't spoken to one who is not just completely asleep at the wheel. And that's my personal opinion. But if I'm running a business, I'm not going to build it on a foundation of sand, basically, is how I would view all the franchise organizations that I've talked to. Because they come to us and they want to come on and talk to the group and stuff like that. And you'll notice none of the franchises have come on and spoken to the group to talk about what they can do because I don't trust them. I don't like it. I don't like that model because we ask them questions about how they run things, especially on the data privacy and the data security side. And it's scary. They're just being like irresponsible. So you're going to get a lot of my personal opinion in this, and that's one of them. But it's a problem, the franchises. And if somebody feels differently about it and they want to introduce me to a great franchise, great. I'll talk to them and we can bring them on the group. So we've got franchise. We can bring in private equity, and those guys know all about organizational strategy because every business they run up and they scale and they build up to suck as much profit out of it as possible. They have an organizational strategy that's designed to do that. And that's why you see those outcomes, right? Partnership, bring in a partner. There's a lot of business people out there who would love to get into the ABA market, but they're not a BCBA. But partnership has all of its own challenges and risks. And then rockstar employees. So this is one that you can do. This is one that actually does happen. If you can hire fantastic, terrific rockstar people to come work for you, those people can do great things. However, it is very difficult to find rockstar employees. It's a very scarce market, right? They're also very expensive, and most of them are just going to go start their own businesses. If they are good enough to step into your business and revolutionize it and run it for you where you don't have to do anything, they're probably going to want to be the one who owns the company. Well, the rockstar employees isn't any better of a situation than the other ones. Or we just keep doing the things the way we're doing them and hope for the best. Hope that we don't have any of these situations that come to fruition, or hope that things get better at some point, or just pray that we make it to retirement. And these are not if, but when. But I want you to think about whether or not you are prepared for, and think about what you would do in preparation for any one of these three scenarios, right? So if you were getting ready for a special guest or a VIP, visiting your center or shadowing your staff, right? If you're just doing it at home or in school, like what if you had the CEO of one of the accreditation companies coming in and they were going to do an article about your operation, how great it is? Would you be excited about them coming and shadowing your staff? Or would you be excited about them coming to your center? Or is there a bunch of stuff that you would need to get done before that happens? How about your next audit? You find out the Medicare fraud control unit is coming, or HHS wants to do a record review, or some type of audit like that. Maybe the state health department wants to come in and look at your records. How ready are you? What would you need to do to prepare for that? Or here's the kicker, and this happens. I have a very close friend of mine who's in the Moffitt Cancer Center right now in Tampa. He's going to be okay, but this happened to him like beginning of December. He just had I just felt weird in my stomach. Turns out he's got colon cancer, right? He had to have surgery. He's going to be down for probably 2 months. And it just sneaks up on you and happens that way. And he can't work from the hospital bed. He can't do anything about it. So I know a lot of you are in a situation where if that happened, you're just going to have to start your business over when you get out of the hospital and you get well again. And that's really not how it should be. You shouldn't be losing all of that progress and all that work that you've done. Some of you have been in business for a year. Some of you have been in business for almost 20 years, right? So you don't want to lose all that progress just because you're out for 30 days. Right now, how do you feel about the outcome of each of these scenarios? Like, how would that work out in your business? And it's not if, but when. Something's going to happen. And we can go back to that last slide and say, we're just going to hope for the best, hope that doesn't happen, or we can get ready for it. So now we're thinking about this bad stuff, right? But let's look forward and think about what we could do. Like, how can we change this? How can we set ourselves up? What if your business could grow without you? I struggled for the first 5 to 8 years that I was in business, that it could run without me. It just couldn't grow without me. Right? I had to be the one to go out and sell new accounts or sell new services or things like that. Right. So I had to be there at my business for it to grow. And I struggled with that. Even after going through all of my organizational strategy, it was one of those areas I was just stuck on. And it took me a few years to figure it out. Right. What if you could take all of your micromanagement and have your team do your micromanagement for you? What if they could self-manage your micromanagement, right? Your standard, exactly the way you wanted things done, but they could self-manage. What if your employee onboarding could be quick and easy, fast, easy, automated, right? Because we're always going to be dealing with RBTs who are in that age group where they're in a transitional time of life. You got 19 to 23-year-old. They're in that age group where, oh, hey, I've been working here for a year and a half. It's been great, but I'm getting married. I'm moving off to Alaska, right? Those are the things that are happening in that age group's life during that time. So you're always going to have turnover. Speed up the onboarding and offboarding process, automate it, document it, eliminate human error, make sure that everybody has their training, make sure that everybody has what they need to do their job and knows what their job is. What if your entire team adored their job? So when they got the call from the private equity company trying to recruit them, they can immediately say, nope, not interested. I love it here and I'm never leaving. Thanks for the offer. Click. What if your team just adored their jobs? What if you could take a vacation whenever you wanted? What if you could just step out for a couple weeks? Even if you didn't go anywhere. Some of us just want to stay home for a week and just let our brains reset. And what if you were always audit ready? What if anytime an auditor walked in, you were just ready to show them everything? Here, sit down at the desk here. Here's our Wi-Fi password. Here's a nice cup of coffee, and here's your login to our system, so you can see here's your auditor's login to our system, so you can see all those reports. Let me know if you have any questions, and then go on about your day. What if you were just always ready for that all the time? We're actually going to talk about how to do this. This isn't one of those sales things, right? I actually want you to know how to get this done. What do we need to get there? To being able to step away, being ready for an audit, not having to run around and make sure everything looks good for a VIP to show up at our center, or not having to sit down your RVT and say, all right, make sure that we do things this way when this person who's coming and doing this news article on you is with you, right? No, you want to be representing yourself and through your systems that your employees and your team are following all the time. So clear structure, clear descriptions and expectations for every role in your business, clear standard operating procedures for repetitive tasks, stuff that you're doing every day, your billing roles. We're going to talk a little bit about the billing role, just as an example. Empowering your people through documentation, making sure that everybody can see exactly what they need to do when they need to do it. And I always use the example of the 4th of July. Nobody has to call me and say, are we working on the 4th of July? They can just go to our system and type in 4th of July or Independence Day, and that'll pull up the employee handbook and the federal holidays that we are closed for. So that's one phone call that I never get is, are we working on the 4th of July? Or we have 24/7 help desk. So we have to make sure that somebody's working on the 4th of July. So offices are closed, who's working, who's not working, all that good stuff. But I don't get those phone calls because they can look it up in our system. That's empowerment. That's people self-managing. That's people not having to call you while you're trying to spend time with your family. And we need to set boundaries and delegate effectively. Make sure everybody knows this is your box. These are the tools that are in that box. This is what you are allowed to use. And these are the boundaries in it. If you need to step out of your box, talk to your supervisor. Or if you have an idea about how to expand your box, work it out with your supervisor. This is why your operating system matters, or your organizational strategy. If you want to remove growth caps, improve your staffing and retention, and prevent burnout, this whole process is what allows that. This is the backbone of your business. This is what it looks like. This is your quick overview. We need an org chart. We need role descriptions for every role on that org chart, manuals for each role, position contracts for each position, not the role. We're going to get into that a little bit more. Standard operating procedures that go with each role. And then playbooks, which are just generally just collections of your standard operating procedures. So setting up a new client, your practice management system is a standard operating procedure. That standard operating procedure is going to go into your client intake playbook. Org chart. This is the foundation of your business. This is your organizational strategy starting point. Okay. And this is where things go sideways immediately, because this is where I see a lot of people put Judy, Sam, Bob, Rick, Tammy, right? That's not what you want here. What you want is each role in your company represented. Even when I had 4 people at my company, when we started off with our organizational strategy, I rebuilt everything around 2013. And we had, I think, 27 roles in our org chart. Even though there are only 4 of us, there are 27 separate roles. So the way that you want to think about this are all those hats that you wear as a business owner. Each one of those hats, you need to start identifying which hat you're wearing when you're doing a thing. If you're setting up a new client in your practice management system, what is the actual role in your org chart that you're performing the duties of? As you're scaling your business out, these are positions that you're going to need to fill. These are boxes that you need to build, and recognize what roles that you're filling as you're filling them, and how much of that time is actually being used out of your schedule to fill that role. So the basics, and however you want to name these is up to you, because it's your business. But you need to have somebody at the top, an owner, CEO, founders. You could have 2 co-founders at the top if you wanted to, maybe 3, but each of those people needs to fill roles as they go down that organizational chart. This is what's going to give you the structure for sustainable growth and scalability, because scalability means that you can quickly hire and onboard people and grow your business, and you're delegating things out to those people through this org chart. But you have to have those roles predefined and decide what the responsibilities, key outputs, all that good stuff is. And we're going to get into that in the next one, the next section here. But if you want me to help you build an org chart, I just use Microsoft Word. It's really simple. Just insert Smart Art, pick the hierarchy option, and then you can right click the Smart Art and say show text pane, and you basically just put in an outline. It'll build your chart for you. But the first thing I would do is sit down and build an org chart that would be suitable for, if you had 100 staff members, what are all the roles that you would probably need to have in place with people in them? You can have 10 BCBAs. There should be 1 spot for BCBA on your org chart. Now, if you want to get some time with me, scan this QR code on the screen, scan it right now, book it with me. I will get on with you and help you build your org chart for free. All right, so role descriptions. Generally, what I do, if you take your org chart, now you have this tree with 25, 30 roles in it. You're going to write role descriptions for each one, at least describing the basic stuff about them. And I'm talking like half a page. So you can have your org chart set up with 25 different roles, half a page for each. You're going to have about a 13-page role description document with all the roles just listed on it. This is going to include responsibilities, reporting structure, who do they report to, who reports to them, all that good stuff. The importance of the role, like why we need somebody in this position, and then what their key outputs and performance indicators are going to be. Okay, I'm your new billing manager. What is it that you want to see from me every day, every week, every month, every quarter? What is it that I can really show you that I'm doing my job? What are the things that you're looking for? This is where you're going to be able to set up your team for success and build your expectations for them. So the moment they walk in the door, they immediately know what's expected of them, or even on the interview process. I wanted to stop here for a minute and talk about what you would put in a role description for your billing specialist. Who has a billing specialist now? Y'all should be able to, Josh, if you could let them unmute so we can talk about it. If anybody wants to chime in, just raise your hand and we'll turn your mic on.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Katie.
I'm still getting my LLC set up. I'm waiting on that, but I was going to go with Jocelyn for outsourcing at Exceptional
That's
Billing.
awesome. Yeah, so Jocelyn's solid. Yeah, you don't have to worry about much there. But still, you still want that role in your company. Even if you're outsourcing it, you want to make sure that your outsourced team knows exactly what your expectations are from them every month and make sure that they're in agreement that, yes, we can provide you with this. In your case, Jocelyn is probably, everybody's using Jocelyn, Julie is too. But in your case, Jocelyn with Exceptional Billing Services, if you don't know, Exceptional Billing Services is amazing. We have a really tight relationship with her in the group. We refer a lot of people to her. Just a really great team, and they're really on top of their billing stuff. But so here's the thing. Jocelyn still works for you. So she's still filling that billing specialist role. She's also probably filling your credentialing specialist role and your RCM role to some extent. But you still need to have these roles laid out on your org chart. We use a lot of different outsourced teams for projects, for specialized management, for certain technology, but they still have a role on our organizational chart. When I go and I sign a contract with somebody and I contract with them to do that job, it needs to fit with what that role description is for them to actually properly fill it. Katie, what are the types of things that you need to see out of that billing specialist
making sure that they're following up on any claims that have been denied.
And how many claims are getting denied?
Yes.
We also put on here generally key responsibilities. What are the areas that you're actually going to manage? What are you actually going to be doing? Why this role matters? It's also important that people know why their job is important. With outsourced, you still need to put that in your role description, because you might scale to the point where you might start getting into something where maybe you're operating in a different country or a different type of therapy where you start doing occupational or speech therapy or something like that. And maybe that's outside of the realm of what Exceptional does. I'm not saying that's the case, but maybe you need to step outside of that to scale, right? You still need to have that role description there so that you can bring other people in and build on top of it. All right, so we have a little half-page description of our billing specialist, the department that they're in, who they report to, their key responsibilities, why their role matters. It's good for people to know how important they are. And then their key outputs. We want to make sure that we have timely payment posting. We want to see you following up on accounts receivable. We want to see you meeting certain benchmarks and metrics within those numbers. We want to see timeliness on our claim submissions, a clean claim rate, like how many of those claims are going through clean. And then our denial rate. We want to keep one high and one low, and they should know which one it should be and how high or how low it should be for them to be able to show that they're doing a good job. All right, so the role manual is a totally separate document. For that billing specialist, they would have a manual, and every role has one. And whether they're outsourced or not, you want to make sure that you have this for every single role. So your role manual is going to start to build out that role is going to say, if you're using an outsourced billing specialist, then my company outsources to this company. This is how we contract with them. This is how stuff gets communicated to them. They use their own IT equipment. They need access to our practice management system. They send monthly reports in on this day of every month. This is the data that it's going to include. You build out that whole manual and you have your expectations there, because you might hire somebody who's going to be your CFO. And when that CFO comes in, now they're over your entire finance department. They need to know what this outsourcing company is doing. So your role manual should include all that, and it should include your contract with an outsourced provider. Now for in-house people, say your RBTs, you need to know what kind of device they're going to need. Are you going to be providing company devices to all those people that are going out and doing in-home services? Or if you're center-based, are you going to just have iPads floating around the center? Are they going to be assigned iPads, or are they going to just grab one off the shelf when they need one? What kind of access are they going to need? Are you using Central Reach, Aloha ABA, whatever it might be? That person's going to need an account set up there. They're going to need an account on your Microsoft 365. They're going to need an email for the company. Or maybe they don't. Maybe you have it set up where they can use a user ID and keep it simple. But that's the kind of stuff that you're documenting in their manual, so that when your onboarding team is setting all this stuff up, they can just flip through the manual, make sure they have everything that they need, and then hand that manual to the person who's filling that role. It's not going to train them completely on their job, because they're going to have to get into the SOPs for that and the playbooks and whatever training program that you put them through. But your training program really should be, this is your role manual. these are your duties. Here's your HIPAA training if it applies to the position. And then your training program is basically teaching them where we write down what we do and how you can find it. And that's your training program. So your role manual is going to include everything from their information systems management, devices, access control, like I said, with your practice management system or any of your cloud systems, your email and stuff. Of course, that's what I always think of because that's what we do. But your supervision and accountability. Who are they supervising and who are they accountable to? A role summary and a job description. This role summary and job description, when you write it, and we're going to be doing a special webinar just about writing good job descriptions. But this job description that goes into that manual should be good enough for you to take it, put it on Indeed, and leave it there. It should be good enough that you're going to take it and post it somewhere to hire somebody for the actual position. So that's the goal here. And then a list of the commonly used SOPs. So this is in your manual. If you're a billing person, you're going to be constantly setting up stuff in your practice management system, new clients, all that stuff. So those types of really common standard operating procedures that they're always going to be doing, just list them on here. And then, of course, more detail on your key outputs and your KPI, your performance indications, right? You want to know when you hire on for a job, what am I doing? Where do I find the rules? How do I find how to do things? And then what do I do to really show I'm doing a great job? What is my boss looking for? And that's your key outputs and your KPIs. You already have them listed on your half-page role description and your role descriptions document, but here you're going to go into detail. You're going to go into why this output is important, how for an RBT, this is the most important thing that this job does. This is where our mission, where the rubber meets the road, where our BT is in front of kiddos and making sure that relationship is reflective of what you want your business to be. So Katie needs to be translated all the way down to the RBT, even when her company is 100 people large, right? That Katie mentality, that Katie dedication needs to go all the way through and trickle down to your RBTs. And this is where you tell them, this is what I'm going to see as a result of you doing your job the right way. And this is how I know you're doing a good job. All right. So position contracts. So we've talked a little bit about roles, role descriptions. So what is your job title? So how do you decide on a job title? And there's many different ways that you can do this. But the easiest way that I've found is as you're looking at your org chart, we'll go back here as just an example. So you might have one little office where you're working and you're the CEO and you're also running operations so that you're also the COO. And you're the person who takes out the trash and vacuums the floor. So you're also the facility manager and the janitor and all the way down. So there could be a couple dozen hats that you're wearing at any given time to keep your business operating. And this is common. This is what most of us have to do. Now, your highest role that you're filling on the org chart is your job title. So if you have a CFO and your CFO is handling billing, RCM, all that stuff, their title is CFO. And that is their position. In your position contract, what you're doing is writing this agreement with your employee for this position. And that position is going to include multiple roles. So you could have a vice president of sales and marketing, and then they could also be your outreach manager and your closer because you only have one person doing all that. But you want to tell them when you hire them, these are all the roles that you're going to be filling as the vice president of sales and marketing. Or you could have a clinical director because you plan on hiring other BCBAs, but you have a friend that you're tight with and you want that person to be your clinical director eventually. And you're going to have them be your clinical director and also your first BCBA. So you can give them the title clinical director, but they're also filling the role of BCBA. If they're doing direct service, they're also filling the role of a BT. I hope that makes sense for everybody. So your position is labeled with the highest title on your organizational chart. All of the roles that person needs to serve are included in their position contract. All the role descriptions, all the role manuals, all the SOPs that are associated with those role manuals, and playbooks also. These are people getting assigned to positions, and then roles are occupied by that position. highest role in the org chart, and every person signs their position contract. These are your expectations. These are the roles that you're serving. The manuals come with it. You know what to do. And within a half a day, that person should know exactly what their job is and where to find how to do their job. You don't have to teach them everything about the job, but you can give them at least the training that they need to know to go in and pull up, how do I add a new client to our practice management system? They should just be able to search it and find that SOP and then start doing it. And I encourage you to have dual monitors whenever you can, because it's nice to be able to pull up a procedure on this side and do the work on this side. Just a little tech note. All right, so now we've established who's who at your company. So we have the positions, the roles that are assigned to them. This is something that we do a lot in Microsoft 365. We set up what's called a Viva landing page. And I always talk about it like the bulletin board for your company, right? Like SharePoint is like your file cabinet. OneDrive is like your briefcase, but that bulletin board in the break room, where if somebody's dog has puppies and they're trying to give the puppies away, where would you put that? Probably on a bulletin board in the break room, or those employment posters that everybody loves putting up in their offices about employee rights and things like that. You know, where does that go if everybody's working remote? Or the directory, emergency phone numbers, the emergency response team, that kind of stuff. Where does that stuff go if you're doing in-home or in school? And even if you're center-based, it's nice to be able to just pull up that internal company webpage that only your employees can see and share all that. One of the things that should be on there are your position role assignments, right? The positions, who's in them, what roles they include, their contact information, everything should be right there where it's easily searchable. Because as you're going through and you're building out your standard operating procedures, you're going to refer to a role in your standard operating procedure. If you have an IT manager, if you're using us, you're outsourced IT, but that IT manager still needs to have a role. So when they go in and they look at your position, your role directory, that's your company directory. So there should be a listing on there for IT manager, your IT company that you've outsourced to, the phone number for the help desk, right? Because one of the standard operating procedures for setting up a new user in your practice management system or setting up a new client in your practice management system, that new client in your practice management system might be a billing specialist that has to do it. Because maybe it needs to be set up properly, and billing does that. That's their responsibility, it's their role. So when somebody pulls up that procedure and they see, well, this is under billing specialist. Who's the billing specialist? I know Timmy is the CFO, but I don't think we have a billing specialist. This is what that directory is for. They go, they look through it. Billing specialist is filled by the CFO, who is Timmy. Cool. That's what I need to go to with this request and ask them to put in this new client. Or if I need to create a new employee, I'm in HR, I'm hiring them, contact the IT administrator to add them to practice management or to create their email address or whatever. Who is that? Go to the directory, IT manager. Every role should be listed on there and who it's filled by. All right. Now, this is something where, and I think you guys understand at this point, you cannot start building your standard operating procedures until your roles are defined. Is that pretty clear at this point? Can I get a thumbs up or a heart on that? I think as you're writing your standard operating procedures, the roles and responsibilities that each of those refer to have to be established. You already have to have that built out. And that's why I always say start with the org chart. Do not go out and spend a bunch of money on a lawyer who's going to write a bunch of standard operating procedures when they don't know how your company is going to be structured, first of all. They don't know really anything about your business, right? You can sit down and have a conversation with them, and they're going to pencil whip some policies they have out of one of their, silly legal form programs, and you're going to pay them a bunch of money to do that. But all of this stuff has to be done first. And it's really not that hard to build your standard operating procedures once you have all of this established. Now, the other things that are going to come into this, especially on the clinical side or the technical side, are the regulatory requirements that you're going to have to meet. So we have organizational strategy, state law, federal law, the BACB code of ethics, and health insurance contracts. When all those things get combined, you're going to have so many things that you have to itemize and make sure that your policies and your procedures fit with those. And it's the same thing with your playbooks, your SOPs, that they're no different. So here's an example. Your lawyer can sit down and write you a standard operating procedure on responding to a request for client records. If you're in Nebraska and HIPAA says if somebody asks you for their records, you have to provide them within 30 days, say. And don't use these numbers. I'm just using it as an example and why you have to have this stuff done before you can write your SOPs. So you're writing your SOP for responding to a records request from a client or a former client. Number one, you need to know what HIPAA requires. HIPAA, I think, says 30 days. Most states are lower than that. So Nebraska might say 10 days. So if you sit down now with a lawyer before you have any of your health insurance contracts, you're going to build a standard operating procedure that's assigning responsibility to roles that may or may not even exist in your company, that you have no assignment for, that you can't really even decide who is it that really should be doing this job. And then when you hire somebody to do that job, they're going to be completely confused because you don't have a role description anyway. But where are the responsibilities held in these standard operating procedures? We don't have that without the org chart and the role descriptions. We don't have our Aetna, say you're contracting with every one of your payers. You could have 30 days on your standard operating procedure. This needs to be responded to within 30 days. And that's in our SOP for records request. Nebraska could say it's 10 days. And your contract with Aetna could require it in 5 days. So if your lawyer writes it for you before you actually have contracts in play, you've got a 10-day standard operating procedure that's not in compliance with your contract. Now, here's what I recommend in this situation. Build your organizational strategy, go through it, develop the roles that you want to have in your company, build the framework for your standard operating procedures. And then when you need to hire a lawyer, you can do it a lot cheaper than $5,000, but you do need a lawyer from time to time. You're going to have them review your insurance contracts. There's a great group that's in here. Josh, if you could put that in the chat, the group that makes the cheat sheets for the actual contracts. But these ladies are, one's a BCBA, one's a lawyer. They go through all that stuff and they make you an actual cheat sheet of these are the things that you need to make sure that you have in your policies and procedures to comply with your contract. Our company has the HIPAA and the state stuff. They have your actual contract. That's right, Honoris Group. They're awesome. So you have all these things that come together so that when you're building your standard operating procedures, you already have a good policy base to build your standard operating procedures from. When you build your standard operating procedure, you want your procedure on procedure, and you want this to be a self-building, self-updating system, because you can implement your system and push that out to your people and say, here, follow this. But what you want to do is you want to give them the ability to actually change the system. Give them a process by which they can improve their own procedures. Each procedure needs to have an owner. That owner is a role on your org chart. A financial procedure might be executed by the billing specialist, but it might be owned by the CFO. The CFO might be the one who says, this is how we're going to do this. And if that billing specialist says, hey, this has actually changed, we have a much better workflow for this, let's sit down and talk about it, they're going to go to the CFO for that to actually change that procedure. Not you, not the CEO. You're on the beach or the golf course or the pickleball court somewhere. You don't need to be bothered with this. This is the CFO's role. This is in their responsibility. The billing specialist is saying, hey, there's a much faster, easier way to do this. I want to change the tools that are in my box, or maybe I want to extend my box out a little bit more so I have a wider boundary, because I can actually take care of a little bit more of this process. So you want to make sure that you're giving your people the tools to build their own standard operating procedures and playbooks. So how do we do that? The first policy that you build is your policy on how you handle policies. I call it the policy on policy. The first standard operating procedure that you build is your standard operating procedure on standard operating procedure. You need to decide how you are going to generate your SOPs, how they're going to be formatted, what needs to be included in each of them. We use the OSCAL format where, you've got an executive summary, purpose, scope, the actual body of the procedure, and then any related standards or any related regulations that go into that. So we use that template for all of our SOPs because we have so many different compliance standards we have to meet. Our policies and our procedures look almost identical other than the name of them. One starts with policy, one starts with SOP. So decide how you're going to organize, decide how you're going to build your SOPs, decide how you're going to build your policies, where you're going to manage this. It's difficult. It gets a little deep when you're doing it all in Microsoft Word and PDF forms and stuff like that. But we'll get into that on later live streams. We'll get a little bit deeper into that. Does anybody have any questions for now on how to get through this or how to build your first SOP?
Is it OSCAL, OSCOW? Is that what you said?
No, it's OSCAL. And don't ask me what that acronym stands for, but essentially, what we put on here is task title, purpose, roles, the roles that are involved, the steps, the actual procedure, right? Click the blue button, then type in the first name, and then click the blue button again and type in the last name. Those are your steps. And that's how detailed it should be, because you should be able to hand a standard operating procedure to anybody off the street as long as they're certified for the job. Some of this stuff is going to assume that you've gone through the RBT training. So you're going to refer back to RBT training in your SOPs, like how to handle an irate parent in their house. This is what you need to do in this situation. This is when you call the police. This is when you call your supervisor. OSCAL, it's a little more involved. Now, if you get on like our GRC platform, it automatically comes out in the OSCAL format. It's a little bit easier to deal with. Did that cover your question, Katie?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So you just want to make sure that you have title, purpose, roles, the steps of the actual procedure, and then the expected outcomes. Like, how do you know when you're done? Or how do you know when you did it right? The screen is going to go black and the computer is going to start smoking. That's not a good outcome. No, it should turn green and it says confirm. A lot of people like to put screenshots in if it's something to do with like computer stuff, but write it out and go through the actual steps. There's also great web platforms out there called Loom is one of them, where you can go through videos and do screen shares, it's you talking. As you're building your training program, you can have videos of you talking, and then you can put your link to that video in your SOP if you want to. If anybody wants to jump on a call with me and actually go through some of this stuff and kind of build your org chart, start your role descriptions, or maybe you want to build your first SOP, as long as you have the procedural steps, because I'm not going to know what those are for your company, but start building out one or two of each of these things. Take advantage of it. We help people do this stuff all the time. And what's most important to us is that we actually get your business started, get it started right. We don't want you giving up after 2 years, but some private equity company comes in and says, here, we'll buy you and we'll get you out of debt. And then you can work for us. You're like, thank God, I'm done with this. I'm burnt out, I'm dying. We don't want that happening. We want you guys to run your businesses, be successful, but then still be profitable and have a life. So that's the goal here. So book that time with me. I'm happy to jump on with any of you and spend an hour going through the setup for your org chart, your role descriptions, any part of this I'll help you with.
You're already doing the work, investing your time, your energy, and your vision. So let's make it count. Build something that works without breaking you. The eBCBA Blueprint is the way. Get started for free with our foundation course.